Mr. C in the studio to provide analysis to these stories. Good morning, Mr. C. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Lagos.
Happy Monday, happy new week, as we
Yeah.
always say. Now, on this in this show, on this segment, please send your contributions through WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. We're streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/ Smooth FM Lagos. So just type Smooth FM Lagos in the search box, subscribe, leave a comment, watch, and invite friends as well. And you can also remember that WhatsApp number is a very important one 0809 444 0981. I'll be streaming live on Instagram at Valentine Ohu, so stay with us and join the conversation. Mr. C, the first story: NMA moves to join resident doctors strike, gives federal government 21-day ultimatum. And in this story, we know that they've been on strike for a long time. The National Association of Resident Doctors have been on strike. Now, the National Executive Council affirmed that no doctor shall be victimized for participating or not participating in the strike action. But it seems that the NMA is still, hinging on the fact that they refuse to accept the federal government stance on implementing the No Work, No Pay as captured in the Trade Dispute Act. But there are some other issues or bones of contention here. What are your thoughts, please?
Okay, thank you, Valentine. So, Nigerian Medical Association over the weekend issued a 21-day ultimatum to the federal government, stating that all the pending issues being faced in the health sector must be resolved, or else they will go on strike. As we are already aware, the National Association of Resident Doctors are currently on strike, medical consultants are currently on the strike, and another body, which is the medical and dental specialists for basic medical sciences, have sued the National Salary, Income and Wages Commission along with the Accountant General of the Federation over certain monetary claims. Now, it's instructive that the health problems have lingered for a while,
Yes.
but the federal government has responded to this ultimatum, and they have said that this notice conflicts with provisions that were agreed in the signed memorandum of understanding between the federal government, the enemy as an observer, NERD, and the other bodies. Specifically, they say that Article 7, which deals with the withdrawal of the circular, which took out resident doctors and house officers from the scheme of service, the enemy, under the provisions of the MOU, were told to present their position in response to that circular and give it to the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Health. As we speak, Valentine, that hasn't been done. Now, Article 10 of the MOU states that the enemy should facilitate the withdrawal of the suits filed by Metsabam, which I spoke about earlier. That hasn't happened. Now, furthermore, the the doctors who the NERDC missed out in the 2020 payment for medical residency funds. The NMA and the NERD were supposed to compile the list of these doctors, and they have about 4 weeks to do that. So the question now is, if you have signed provisions, you have signed agreed timelines,
Yes.
those timelines have not expired. What is the underlying factor? What is the basis for this ultimatum? Especially given that there's certain steps that need to be taken by the enemy, the NERD, and the other stations, and there is no evidence yet that they've done what they ought to do.
It's interesting that this is coming out. I mean, you're making it clear to everyone that against the usual rhetoric, that would be in support of the doctors and against the government, because that seems to be the convenient position. The NMA is not necessarily innocent of all charges, of all accusations. They still have their own faults in this, a part to play. And because an MOU is all, it's not with a single entity. I mean, signed between one or two or more, right?
Correct.
So if you sign a memorandum of understanding, you should at least, meet up with your own part.
Correct. So it's important that we move beyond the rhetoric and the grandstanding. Yes, there are long-standing problems. There's structural problems with the health sector, but we cannot resort to strikes each time you want to resolve or even discuss these issues.
Mm.
The enemy and its associations should go ahead and do what they ought to do under the terms of the provision, because normally it is usually the case of the government being not carrying out its functions. Now, interestingly, we don't have their response to the government's position. I would love to read their response, hear their response, and if they have proof that they've done what they ought to have done or what they've been accused of not doing, they should provide it.
The government, through the Senator Chris Ngige, who's Minister of Labour and Employment, has said that the federal government has approved the sum of 4.8 billion naira. That's already in the 2021 service-wide vote. That's for the administration, or rather, the payment of medical residency training that was agreed upon. But also said that the part where the doctors are asking the government to exempt them from the application of Section 43 of the Trade Dispute Act that provides for no work, no pay sanctions for striking workers. The federal government said that's impossible. That's an impossible ask.
Okay, so Valentine, with respect to Section 43, it's not news. For at least the last 20, 30 years, the government has always suggested or indicated that whenever there's a strike, they will not be paid. But at the end of the day, they go on to pay. Now, these guys, it's not like we have a lot of these professionals. So if you refuse to pay these guys, or if you even go ahead to sack them, who's going to do the work?
That's the thing. So that kind of empowers or emboldens the other person to bully you with that provision.
No. So we don't support bullying. We enjoin the federal government to always live up to its obligations, and if for any reason it cannot, swiftly explain, provide the information so that people have the understanding.
At least live by example. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Let's move on to power. Now, power in a different context, this time around electricity. So the Premium Times has this report. There was a confusion over the weekend. Did they ask? Did they not ask? Was there an increase? Was there not an increase? But it's coming from the Office of the General Manager Loss Reduction, a co-electricity distribution company, Olumide Anthony Jerome. It's bound to be taken seriously. Now, what came from his office was a circular that was marked 23 EKEDP GMCLR 25 2021, dated August 25th, 2021. He announced the DISCO's decision to raise tariffs. But then that raised the furor, naturally. But there's a conflicting information that's reaching us that the EKDC stakeholders, or rather the authority, is denying this and saying it's false. So who do we believe?
So these are my thoughts. They're planning to increase the tariff. I think they were testing waters, or he took that step without the due authorization.
Or possibly leaked it.
Or it was probably leaked not by him, and they're embarrassed that it was leaked ahead of time. Now, the truth of the matter is, it was on their letterhead. It was apparently his signature. He hasn't come out to say that he did not sign that statement. They haven't come out to say that the statement is not theirs. Rather, what they say is the statement is unsubstantiated. What does that mean?
Remember last September, right? There was a tariff hike that was implemented amidst controversies and rejection by members of the organized labor, and the government decided to offset that by introducing a rebate in the tariff and freezing an increase for Band E. Now, these increases are bound to happen. We know this. It's the reality of things. It's a cost-reflective tariff. So if we're going to go down this road, where do you think will be the middle point where we all now see eye to eye?
So, yes, we agree that we're not paying the proper prices for electricity now, and cost-reflective tariffs are the way to go. And in fact, one of the conditions imposed by the World Bank to access their facilities, the removal of all subsidies. Now, for that to happen, there has to be an improvement. For us to meet somewhere in the middle, there has to be an improvement on public power supply. Right now, a lot of people are complaining because the suggested tariff bands and suggested service delivery hours are not meeting. There's always a conflict. And because there are no signed service level agreements with EKDT or Ikeja distribution, they're encouraged to breach even those suggested tariff levels, and nothing happens.
But some of them give reasons, to paucity of funds, that they don't have enough funds to service to optimum. And this is the reason why they are asking or nudging the federal government to implement this increase, so they can fund all the requirements.
So, Valentine, Yes, the electricity industry is grossly underfunded. Now, any increase is in naira,
Mm-hmm.
but the value of the naira against the dollar continues to fall. The parts needed, the machinery needed, are not made in Nigeria, and they're priced in foreign exchange.
Even the meters.
Yes. No, no, they started
They
local
started
production,
producing.
yes.
Okay.
But
Thank God for
the
that.
truth of the matter is, they will always, the lives of citizens have improved. Now,
Yes.
if we were to move to cost reflective tariffs in the power sector and in the petrol sector, this country will be on fire.
Now, Sarah, the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project has filed a lawsuit asking the federal government or Federal High Court in Lagos to compel the federal government to disclose details of proposed payments of 729 billion naira to 24.3 million poor Nigerians, including logistics for the payments, the list of the beneficiaries, and whether the payments were made in cash or through the use of the bank verification numbers of these citizens. These are some of the commonsensical, allusions we made sometime last week when this issue was raised. Now, Sarah, has asked this question and compelled the federal government, but no, there's no date set or fixed for the hearing of this suit. But it's interesting that this is coming up. And these are things that are supposed to be asked, for a government that's, inclined to be competent and transparent. But what are your thoughts, please?
So this is most regrettable because ordinarily these are facts you should be able to get just by writing a letter or making an inquiry. Now, before Sarah files a lawsuit, Nigerians need to understand this. They would have made an application under the Freedom of Information Act, and the relevant government ministry, department, or agency, in their usual culture of impunity, will ignore it, and then they will be forced to go to court.
Yeah, but the
And
last one they asked, they responded.
when they respond, which is very rarely, Sarah doesn't need to go to court. But I was speaking to when Sarah has to go to court, they have been ignored. Now, 24.3 million Nigerians, poor Nigerians, have apparently been picked. What were the criteria?
Mm.
How do you determine who is a poor Nigerian? Now, more importantly, how are you going to pay them? Are you paying them in cash? Or are you paying them through account? Who are these people? Because some people believe that these guys don't exist, and you cannot blame them for thinking that way because there's a continuing trust deficit between this government and the people of Nigeria. And it's not just restricted to this government. For the past 20 or 30 years, there's always been a trust deficit between the Nigerian government in power at any point in time and the people. Now, what does it take to publish the list? Okay, these are the criteria we used in selecting them. These are their name. Okay, you put it on the website. You
Also,
know,
remember, this is not the first time that
yes,
the government is paying or giving money
yes.
to
So
people.
even the
So, in the
previous,
past, what was the precedent? What were the metrics
yes,
used in the past? What was the success level? And how do you now say, okay, these
okay.
people benefited? Who are the next people to
How do we
follow?
even establish that once the money is voted, that all the people who should get it actually get it?
Mhm.
So there are too many unanswered questions, and this is a government that prides itself on honesty, integrity, and transparency. But in this particular matter,
We wait to see. We wait to see. Somebody here says, thank you, Sarah. Well done, Sarah. That's Shagun. It would be nice if they also beam their searchlights on state governors. And then Adelolu says, no work, no pay. What happened to work done and hasn't been paid for before the strike? Chine from Ikeja says, this whole resident doctors and labor union activity defies common sense. If someone is dissatisfied with his employer or work environment, why on earth wouldn't he leave? Why stay on the job and hold everyone to ransom? How did this world become so complicated? Janelle from Keja, thanks for your message. Ifako from Gagla says, good morning, great minds. I got less units when I recharged with the same amount last Wednesday. I raised this with IKADC. Our store power supply to my area has improved and we've been moved to a higher tariff platform. Hope same will be done if power supply falls or fails rather. Kunle Bangwe, thank you for your message. Orisha says, good morning, guys. The increase has already happened. I was about calling IKDC this morning why I was charged 58 naira or 58.1 naira per unit as against 53.4 naira last month. I noticed the increase when I recharged yesterday. I'm not against the increase as power is expensive and has forex cost components, but we should be duly informed by the regulators and service providers about an increase. The discos should own the increase with their chest and not deny it. Premium Times has this next story, Mr. C. Let's get into it. Interesting story here. Community leaders, religious bodies, traditional rulers, security operatives, and members of the civil society groups and government functionaries came together, had a meeting that lasted about 5 hours, and agreed to return repentant Boko Haram terrorists, about 3,000 of them. But there were conditions. Mr. C, please let's get into this.
Okay, so thank you. Over the weekend, as you just said, stakeholders met in Borno to discuss the return of repentant Boko Haram members into the communities. But they insisted that these members be properly profiled to avoid the hasty release of hardened elements into the larger society. And they also called for educational opportunities to be created for children of these members and even the members themselves as a way of de-radicalizing them. Now, the question I have and the thoughts that I have are these: murder is still an offense in Nigeria. So some of these elements, if some of these elements have at the very least killed innocent Nigerians, is there any plan to get them to answer for their crimes? Because this is like a backdoor amnesty program. If you're going to give them amnesty, come out with your full chest and tell us you are giving amnesty to murderers. And then, if that is the case, be prepared to apply that amnesty package across board. So, for example, if another group decides to be repentant, and again, I continue to ask this question: how do we tell that they repented? Because there was a power struggle between them and ISWAP, and ISWAP has gotten the upper hand. So is it that they are repenting because they're really tired and have changed their ways, or because they've been overthrown by a stronger group and they want to come, rest, regroup, and then come out again? So these are many questions that the authorities need to answer. And it's important for the people, the members of these communities, because these people have lived a life of violence. Now, you want to reintegrate them into the communities. To do what precisely?
Exactly. And some of these questions are very valid. Thank you, Mr. C, for asking this. But first, I'd like to say special shout out to Premium Times for labeling them terrorists. But I find it curious that it's ex-terrorists. How do they become ex? And another curious point is the fact that these 3,000 persons, that's if they're just running amok. They're in the custody of the federal government. It's noted in this detail in the story. Please read. 900 confirmed members of Boko Haram here has been stated that has surrendered to the Cameroon forces. Now 3,000 out away from these 900 ex-terrorists are currently in custody of the federal government. Remember that there was a time that I'll take us back to this information. There was a time that there was an announcement that was made. Even the Interpol said that they had a list of sponsors of Boko Haram.
Yes.
They haven't been tried. These 3,000 that Borno state government and the stakeholders are asking for their release, they've been in custody of the federal government. Why haven't they been tried? So all these questions, although some members, especially victims or those whose families were affected, emphasize the need for there to be
Nobody is considering the relatives of the victims. Imagine walking in your community and you see the man who killed your relative, your
brother, your
siblings,
son, anywhere,
walking around freely. Surely,
and they've been probably given a house, the source of livelihood, and then the victims are left in penury. Anyway, let's move on to this message here. Please add your names to your messages so we can take them. That's a condition here. Jonah from Istola, thank you for this message. Please send yours to 0809 981. Our next story here talks about still similar issues. Now, this is a report from the United Nations Children's Fund. Yesterday, they said 200 Nigerian students were still in captivity after school abductions have plagued the nation since December of 2020. What are your thoughts, especially with the highlights of various numbers? 200 Nigerian students still being held. More than 1,000 have been abducted since December of 2020. Mr. C, please.
So
Take it.
these are very shocking figures. 1,000 Nigerian children kidnapped, abducted since December 2020. That is 8 months. Now, of this number, 200 are still in captivity. What is the offense? They went to school to get an education. And this speaks to the general insecurity pervading the land. Now, it's shocking and disappointing that our authorities continue to suggest that they're on top of the situation when the evidence clearly indicates the opposite. Now, we've had instances where particular states are repeatedly attacked, and it begs the question, do they not learn any lessons? Is nothing gained from previous abductions? And more importantly, why are we not making attempts to address the root cause? Now, the root cause of every abduction, every kidnapping is to make money. Now, the people who are doing these abductions want money and for whatever reason have resorted to crime.
Mm.
Until we address both the economic opportunities and even education, because until a man is educated, his mind is at most primitive
Mm.
and he will not be able to rise above his station in life without the proper education. So it's a multi pronged approach, and sadly, our governors or some of our governors don't seem to get the full picture. They don't seem to see the big picture. And until we deal with the symptoms, until we deal with the root causes, we will continue to discuss abduction after abduction. And it makes no sense. Are we then saying that the Nigerian state cannot guarantee children the opportunity to learn in peace?
Basic human right. By the way. Speaking of which, let's go to pensions and how some members benefit, beyond what's required. Governor's pension law, stakeholders rule Lagos Assembly's failed repeal of privileges. If you'd recall, some months ago, some 10 months ago precisely, the governor of Lagos State, Sanwo-Olu, said that the administration had concluded plans to repeal the public office holder payment of pension law. I'll remind you of some of the provisions of this law. In Section 2 of the Public Officer Holder Payment of Pension Law 2007 of Lagos State, it had approved one residential house each for a governor, deputy governor at any location of their choice in Lagos, and one residential house in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, for the governor on 2 consecutive terms. The law also awarded 6 new cars every 3 years for the governor, addition to one pilot and 2 backup cars, while the deputy governor gets 2 cars in addition to one pilot and one backup car every 3 years. An ex-governor is also to enjoy 100% of the basic salary of the serving governor, that's about 7.7 million naira per annum, as well as free healthcare for himself and his entire family. The law also says former governors will be entitled to furniture allowance, which is 300% of their annual basic salary, totaling 23.3 million naira. House maintenance allowance as 10% of basic salary, that's about 778,296 naira. There's unity allowances, I'm just, the details, right? But the point here is, after the governor made his announcement, everybody were happy with Sha. It was like, this is a good move, nice. It's lead by example on everything. There was consultation with stakeholders, former governors. Babatunde Fashola, the former governor of Lagos State, had said, oh, this was a lofty idea. He refused in the first place when they offered him that benefit. Um, Even Tinubu as well said, oh, that was good. That was a good move. That was bold, and enjoined other APC stakeholders to emulate the steps of the governor, Sanwo-Olu. Now, 10 months here, they didn't repeal the law. The State House of Assembly instead cut it by 50%. Why, Mr. C?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure they know the answer themselves. Now, it's clear that when the governor made that statement, that he didn't have a full picture and a full understanding of the larger picture. Now, what they've done is they've reduced certain things. So the houses are gone. They've expunged the provision that provided for houses, but almost everything else is impliedly still there. They've reduced the vehicles from 6 to 2, a car and a van. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the price of a van could easily get you 3 cars depending on the specification of the van.
Thank you.
Now, beyond all of these media gimmicks, what is there to show that they're actually complying with this law? If they build a house for a guy, for any of the ex-governors, how would you know? You wouldn't know because they're not going to put a signboard outside and say this is for the governor. Now, the country is in a dire bind. All the states are suffering. The federal government is suffering from reduced revenue. And these provisions, laws like this, do not make any sense, given the fact that some of these governors go on to join the Senate, some join the federal cabinet, and they're collecting allowances in those places.
Let me give you a number to that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing up that point. For instance, as we speak, there are 16 governors who are now senators, and they're enjoying benefits from being ex-governors and being senators. There are 9 former governors who are currently ministers. Mr. C, to your point.
So, again, cutting it by 50% shows that these lawmakers are still not fully in tune with the current realities. Right now, Lagos State does not need such a law. These individuals remember that for 8 years, they're not spending their money. Everything is provided for by the state. And let's not fool ourselves. Our realities, nobody serves as a governor in Nigeria now for 8 years and comes out a poor man. It's actually impossible. I'm not accusing anyone of engaging in criminal activity, but it is. I'm here to see the governor who comes out poor. So really and truly, even these sums that have been stated are minuscule compared to the wealth they exhibit.
So it's that optic really that lures people into politics, not necessarily for the service part of it, the conversation. Which is why you should get your PVC now, so you elect those you feel would serve selflessly. Ekpe residents in Lagos are crying and sending an SOS to the government over kidnappings. They're saying they're living a stressed life right now, having sleepless nights, and the situation is really precarious. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so very quickly, this is another reminder of the sad security situation we're facing. Now, they're complaining because the kidnapping, the abductions have increased and become unbearable. Now, the question is, what is the Lagos State Police Command doing? What are the police stations in the Ekpe district of Lagos doing? Have they stepped up their intelligence? Have they checked all the known criminal hideouts within Ekpe to find out, one, who are these people doing it? We will not win this war on crime, banditry, abductions, kidnappings without an intelligence driven approach. Why are we not applying technology, drones? Nigeria has 2 satellites that are in orbit somewhere in space. What are they being used for?
I don't really know this. Sorry, no, ignore my question.
So the truth of the matter, they claim they're in orbit. Why are we not using them? Why are we not using technology to drive this process? And then it begs the question, a few months back, there was this hue and cry about getting your national identification number. You must link it to your telephone number. If you don't link it to your mobile number, you can't use it. Excuse me, the kidnappers, the abductors, they are calling every day. What numbers are they using?
I mean, that didn't go through. I mean, that stopped at some point. There was a threat for the SIM cards to be blocked, but that wasn't, seen to the end. Anyway, so which is why we're here. Final story, just the means to mention. Even the Imo State government has done something quite laudable. About 50 students of Imo State origin studying in the University of Jos, Plateau State, returned safely to the states at the behest of the state governor, Governor Hope Uzodinma. He had asked and ordered the evacuation of these students and provided free transport and security and said they'll be fed, taken care of at the expense of the government. Quick thoughts, Mr. C. 30
Okay,
seconds.
this is one of the few things he's gotten right, and kudos to him that he's safely returned Imo State students from Jos back to Imo State. Well done.
Thank you so much, Mr. C. Quick look at the messages here. Deji from BSAM says EKDC and the counterparts have actually increased the rates and it's still crushing. There's no notice whatsoever. And the supply is really poor. I used to pay 9,000 now. I pay 30,000 naira monthly. Leke says, don't forget LNSC. Visit the Keja local government, for example. All LNSC bikes are abandoned there and how do they go to the nooks and the crannies? Gary Newton says, kudos to the analyst, Mr. C, about these repentant Boko Haram members. Where were they when the Defense Academy was attacked? Samuel from Lekki says, the truth is, when the Lagos State repeals this pension law for ex-governors, they will just find another way to take the money, even if it means owing salaries and pensions of those who actually worked for 35 years. 8:01 is the time. Let's continue this conversation on social media. On Instagram, I posted the headlines and also the just highlights of the stories. Please go interact. I would really appreciate that. Thank you for those. Thanks for those who watched on YouTube and commented. Thank you on Instagram. Up next, exactly 9 minutes, we'll come back for a roundtable discussion on taxes. Let's understand our taxes. Continuing the conversation we started last week, Monday. Stay with us here on Smooth.
The headlines, the stories.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Where's I?
I'll leave. Oh, wow. For this week. She'll be back next Monday. Thanks, my G.
More grease to your elbows.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
This is what you just picture.
Guy.
Now that Nebo guy,
And the YouTube stream, please. Thank you.
that guy who was on that channel's program, that retired, he was really cared wanted.